to Special Reports. I'm Emily Finn, along with Beau Davidson. The Senate has officially voted to confirm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as of the next new Secretary of Health and Human Services. Kennedy cleared the final hurdle after the Republican-controlled chamber voted 52 to 48 to approve his nomination. His confirmation was a controversial process, with liberal senators pressing him on vaccine skepticism and his stance on environmental issues.
Michigan State Senator John DeMoose joins us now to talk more about RFK Jr.'s confirmation. Senator, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. You guys are in Florida here, and we just got 10 inches of snow at the state capitol in Michigan. So,
well, I know you have to be a little envious of us, but someone I think we're all envying today probably is RFK Jr. because he cleared the confirmation process. And I know it had been controversial, and people are expecting big change from RFK when it comes to the Health and Human Services Department. So, Senator, what are you hoping he is able to accomplish right now that he has officially been confirmed in this new role?
You know, he's actually a perfect fit for what Trump is doing right now. And I think that's the reason I like him. I never thought in a million years I'd be excited about supporting a Kennedy. I just didn't as a Republican guy. But I like him for the same reason I like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, is that something has to happen. Somebody needs to go in there and start really shaking things up and doing something different, because what we've been doing for decades, either under Republican or Democratic control, isn't working, or we wouldn't be $30-some trillion in debt and spending money on all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk would absolutely have to agree with you on that. And I think you're right. It is way overdue to be taking a closer look at all of our federal agencies. I do want to get your take on this, though, staying on RFK Jr. Senator Mitch McConnell, he was the only Republican to vote no on Kennedy's nomination, citing his experience with polio as a child and his support for vaccines. Were you surprised by this move from McConnell at all?
You know what? No, I wasn't, because he's been a bit of a contrarian, which I also like. I mean, I see this in the Senate, that I never particularly get mad at anybody over their votes. I always assume that they must have some good reason for doing it. If they're a reasonable person, he has a lot of leadership experience. If that's been his personal experience with a polio vaccine, that makes some sense. I'm just glad it wasn't enough to stop RFK, because I really do believe RFK is going to be asking some very good questions that need to be answered. He said some things, Kennedy has said some things I don't even necessarily agree with, but I'm ready to have somebody ask these hard questions and get some good answers for it. So it doesn't really bother me he voted no. I'm just glad it wasn't enough to stop the whole thing.
Yeah, and you have to stir the pot sometimes, Senator, because we can't have business as usual, particularly when our youth are very, very unhealthy and our country at large is also very unhealthy. Well, Senator, the Senate also voted to confirm Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence this week, and Mitch McConnell was once again the lone Republican to vote against her. Do you think Gabbard was the right pick from President Trump on this particular role?
Again, it's very much in character. And the bottom line is, you either love it or you hate it. It's why I voted for Trump. And it drove me nuts. During the first 4 years of his first administration, I have friends who are Democrats and liberals, and they were always talking about anybody who supported Trump, they were racist or they were ill-informed or there's any of these things. And I finally stopped one of them. I said, none of you have ever asked me why I supported Trump. And I'm not a racist. And I'm well-informed. And they said, well, why did you support him? And I told them the same thing that I would say today, because I got sick of the perfectly polished politician who had the great smile and the starched shirts and said all the right things and never really did anything. And so the bottom line is the people Trump seems to be picking are people who also are in that same vein. Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democrat congresswoman who's certainly ready to rattle cages. I like her for the same reason I like Trump. I like him for the same reason I think it's great that Elon Musk is there, and it's an absolute offense to the establishment. And we sure need it, don't we? Look at all the waste he's finding. So, no, I think this is great. It's very much in line with what Trump is trying to accomplish overall, and I'm very supportive of it. Again, Mitch McConnell may have his reasons for opposing her. I respect him as a man. He's shown good leadership over the years. I just think that we're doing something different now, and I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like you support former Democrats that have become Republicans. Everyone you just mentioned, they've all left the Democrat Party, or as they have said, the Democrat Party has left them, and really are opening their eyes to conservative Republican politics and policies. I think the whole country has been doing that lately. Now, I do want to... Go ahead.
I think you're right. You know what? People are sick of just mindless partisanship too. There are some great Democrats down here I work with in the state Senate that I would consider friends. I support some of their policies. Some of them I distinctly do not. But if you're able to separate the good from the bad and people just want to see us actually work for good policy, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's going to start with this newly formed Department of Government Efficiency. I mean, their efforts to cut government waste has been incredible so far. Elon Musk, he's really taken a deep dive into the federal agency spending. Preparations are underway for massive layoffs. Do you think that what Musk is doing with Doge is, as we've been saying throughout this whole conversation, just really, really overdue here?
Yeah, I think people are going to realize throughout this nation and throughout our government that the jig is sort of up. I mean, we're done doing business as usual. I'm shocked. I can't believe anybody's not shocked to see some of what our money has been spent on. And I mean, I'm a well-informed guy. I had no idea. Or to hear that news the other day about we literally can only accept 10,000 resignations or retirements a month because our system, you saw that with the mine in wherever it was, West Virginia, is hand process these retirements. This is craziness. And it takes somebody who really, frankly, doesn't give a damn, who has no reason to even want this job, who's just going to come in and do it, like an Elon Musk, to get this stuff done. So I'm thrilled that they're doing it. I get it's a total offense. I think people need to give them a little bit of a chance here. I mean, sure, there's going to be some missteps. We've been in office for 3 weeks. Some of this isn't going to be comfortable. Some of this they're going to say we're cutting all this and then say, oh, well, wait, we can't always cut all this. But we need somebody who's willing to go in and break things, or else we're just going to continue down this path that goes nowhere good.
Yeah, Senator, what was shocking about what you just said is if you didn't know about these expenditures, we as people, the American people, sure didn't know about it either. So I think that's what's shocking. And you're in politics, you're a senator, and you should know about these things, and you didn't know. So that means the vast majority of American people didn't know. So I think you're right. We've got to give them a chance to go cut out the waste, fraud, and abuse. But let's talk about
I just was talking to another senator, sorry to interrupt, but saying we ought to do Michigan Doge. Because, I mean, our budget that was just proposed by our governor is up to $86 billion. I mean, just a few years ago was half that. It was in the 40s and early 50s. And now it's $86 billion. You mean to tell me there's not a bunch of garbage we're not funding in there, buried in different places? I think everybody needs to do this. We need to do it because it's the right thing to do. And we need to do it because we've been living off our kids' inheritance, so to speak. I mean, they're the ones who are going to have to pay this stuff when we're long gone. It's not right.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question, Senator, because you talk about, Doge at the federal level being done at the state level. In your home state of Michigan, you recently introduced legislation to make tips tax-free. That's very much in line with similar federal proposals from the Trump administration. So tell us more about why this is important for Michiganders.
Well, okay, it's, you know what, honestly, in a perfect world, I'd get rid of the income tax. I mean, I like use taxes and other things like that. Obviously, there's a role for government, but we're not going to do anything like that anytime soon. So you look for these little areas you can do it. And this was related to, first of all, I can't believe the pushback I'm getting, because this was something that both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris said they wanted at the federal level. And so I don't know if that was just posturing perhaps by some people to make appeal to their base, but I sort of took them at their word. Yeah, these aren't, let's get rid of that tax. It's a good thing. But it's also tied to a problem that we have directly here in Michigan, where an outside group came in and is getting rid of this tipped credit. It's kind of a complicated thing, but where it's jacking minimum wage through the roof, but getting rid of the ability to pay tipped workers less. And nobody wants this. So this is going to go into effect on February 21st. And my bill was somewhat in response to that, saying, look, if we can't stop that from going into effect, let's at least help the workers out there who are earning these tips.
But we will certainly be keeping a close eye once this hopefully does ultimately go into effect. And I know my family in Michigan watching is going to be calling you about that state income tax stuff. They're going to want you to go after that now.
But do you know how many people so you're in Florida. Do you know how many residents, especially in my district, live 6 months in a day in Florida because you guys don't have income tax? And we do. And we're driving all these people away. We're one of the few states that's losing population. And it's in no small part because of our tax structure here. And if we got rid of that, I guarantee it would help with that, with our population. So.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. And I think it actually played a really big role in just the political nature of the state of Michigan. It was one of the swing states that really tipped the scales in President Trump's favor during last November's presidential election. He has been hard at work, as we've talked about throughout this entire conversation, implementing massive change at the federal level, delivering on the promises that he made on the campaign trail. What would you say to kind of put a cherry on this conversation here, what would you say are the top issues for Michigan residents that the president really needs to be focused on addressing right now?
Well, I think the number one issue by far is inflation. And this has just been, it's ravaging our entire economy. Everybody sees it when we're going and paying this much money for eggs, which also has to do with avian flu, I know, but everything going through the roof since COVID has been ridiculous. And I think that's one of the reasons why President Trump won this state, is because we were sick of Democrats telling us that everything's okay and the economy's doing great. And we know it's not, because we are having trouble paying our own bills. I think inflation's a big deal. Energy's a huge deal. And in the state of Michigan, we've been under Democratic control in the Senate, House, and the governorship. We just won back the House. But last term was so frustrating. We passed the most radical energy policy anywhere besides probably California. And the bottom line is this is something that I think that Trump needs to really speak to and get us back to a more rational, oil and gas is great. We need to keep them. What we just did in Michigan was to mandate that our state be completely carbon neutral by 2040. It's just craziness what we've instituted, basically our own Green New Deal, and hopefully President Trump will help us with that.
Absolutely. Well, Senator DeMoose, we thank you so much for joining us today and imparting your great wisdom to us. Thank you so much, and stay warm up there in Michigan, sir.
Hey, you guys are great. Anytime. I love talking to you. So.
Thank you. We do as well. And we'll be right back with more Special Report. Welcome back to Special Report on this lovely Valentine's Day. At the top of the show, you saw an interview that Emily Finn and I had with Michigan Senator John DeMoose yesterday, as our show was preempted by some of the RFK Jr. confirmation process. Emily has today off, and we want to continue our show today with a discussion of how faith intersects with our president, our policies, and our culture. Dr. Rob Pacienza is the CEO and president of Coral Ridge Ministries and the founder of the Institute of Faith and Culture right here in South Florida, and the senior pastor of Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. It's a beautiful stained glass church that I often drive by in Fort Lauderdale. Welcome back to Special Report, Dr. Pacienza.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, Pastor, I want to start off this interview with a very interesting development in the Presbyterian Church in America, or the PCA for short. Todd Starnes reported that the PCA had been advising illegal aliens how to interact with ICE, saying, if you do not have lawful status, it is recommended not to carry documentation showing your country of origin. Once this was revealed, the PCA then pulled down the instructions. The Mission to North America for the PCA then posted a statement saying, quote, we recently posted links on our webpage to external organizations offering a range of recommendations and frequently asked questions on immigration. MNA's leadership erroneously allowed the posting of content that advised undocumented persons on ways to avoid being detained by authorities. We affirm that it is our Christian duty to obey the lawful commands of the civil magistrate and be subject to their authority. To counsel otherwise is a sin. We confess that we fell short of our biblical and confessional standard. We repent and apologize. So, Pastor, what is your reaction to what the PCA was doing and their subsequent backtracking and repentance?
I was shocked and appalled. I was embarrassed as a Christian American, as an evangelical, and in particular, a minister in the Presbyterian Church of America. The PCA, and in particular, the Mission to North America, has no business offering legal advice, especially legal advice that is encouraging illegal immigrants to blatantly disobey the law. Thankfully, the leadership of the PCA came out quickly with a statement. They pulled down the illegal advice that was on their website. They corrected course. They repented. And hopefully a lesson is learned for our denomination and for all other conservative denominations to really keep tabs on what is going out on behalf of the denomination, communications, and any statements to make sure not only are they in line with leadership, but let's make sure they're in line with the Word of God.
Absolutely. And Pastor, in a more general sense, what is the church's responsibility both pastorally and civically when it comes to shepherding people who might be on the run from the law? And that might even include convicts, murderers, predators, or other deviants.
Yeah, Romans 13 says it very simply, according to the Apostle Paul, that we are to obey the civil authority, that they are there on behalf of God, that God has ordained all rulers, all civil magistrates to lead on behalf of God. And so therefore we recognize that God is sovereign. He puts imperfect people in charge, but we are to obey them as long as they're leading in accordance with the Word of God. We are to obey them, to respect authority. So anybody who's blatantly disobeying the law, blatantly breaking the law, as illegal immigrants are doing, it's our responsibility for them to repent, to obey the law, and to live in accordance with the laws of the land. That's the responsibility of the church, and that's the responsibility of every Christian.
Well, in piggybacking off of this story, Pastor, one of the biggest recipients of the grants in the Biden administration was Catholic Charities USA, who, according to USA Spending, received over $2 billion from HHS, DHS, and FEMA. It seems that Biden gave those grants to Catholic Charities to help resettle those migrants for political purposes, but some allocations were fraudulent. How do you view this massive cash transfer that became basically a political tool?
It's terrible, and it just reminds all Americans of really what has been happening over the last 4 years in the administration in Washington, D.C., that monies that should have been used to go to people that were really hurting and really needed help. Case in point, those that were displaced because of the hurricane. We think about all of the people that lost their homes, lost their livelihood, lost their financial resources in North Carolina that really received little help from the federal government. When we see taxpayer money being used in such a fraudulent way, just another reminder for all Americans to really wake up to what's really going on. We, the people, understanding that we have a responsibility to be engaged, and Christians in particular have a responsibility to make sure that our government officials are held accountable and that they are operating according to God's design for government to promote the common good and restrain evil. And what we see here is not only fraudulent, but it's absolutely wrong.
Amen to that. Well, President Trump, Pastor, has totally toppled the transgender movement by getting them out of women's sports and preventing genital mutilation for minors. As a pastor, how do you see transgenderism, and does it run contrary to the words that we read in Genesis about man and woman?
Absolutely. The whole gender madness that we're seeing in America, particularly in the last 4 to 5 years, absolutely runs contrary to what we see in the Word of God. Our culture says that we can define right and wrong, and in particular, we can define gender. We can define what a male is and what a female is, but the Word of God, particularly in Genesis 1, says that God defines male and female in His image. And so I applaud what this current administration is doing. It's honoring the creation order. It's honoring God's design for gender and sexuality. And we need to understand when God's design is honored, societies and culture flourish. When God's design is suppressed and the seculars of society get to advance their version of what is true and what their version is of what a male and female is, then societies crumble and they fall apart. So let's applaud the early executive orders of this administration and thank God that they are honoring God's design for gender and sexuality.
Amen. God's design is perfect. Well, we got about just 30 seconds left or so, Pastor. Your Institute of Faith and Culture has an upcoming event, April 4th through 6th, called Kingdom Come, the Mind of Christ in Our Secular Age. Tell us a bit about it and where folks can go to register for it.
Well, they can go to institutefc.org, institutefc.org to register for that event in Fort Lauderdale, April 4th through the 6th, in a secular society that says there's no room for God. We want to reclaim that narrative and say, no, we need God back in the public square. We need to be operating with the mind of Christ, not only in private, but in public. And that is what Kingdom Come is about, April 4th through the 6th, institutefc.org.
Indeed, we do. Well, Dr. Pacienza, thank you so much for joining me today, as always, and God bless you, sir.
God bless you.
And coming up on Special Report, the Senate is set to vote next week on Kash Patel's nomination to lead the FBI. We will discuss his path to getting confirmed with independent journalist Ann Vandersteel. We'll be right back. Well, the IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and it just stepped up enforcement for 2025. If you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, don't wait for the IRS to come after you. Simply avoiding your tax troubles is the worst thing you can do. Getting ahead of this is the smart move, but never contact the IRS alone. Turn it over to the team at Tax Network USA. Now, why? Because not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS. This means that they know which agents to deal with and which to avoid. Tax Network USA has proven strategies that are designed to settle your tax problems in your favor, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million. Their attorneys and negotiators have resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. Talk with one of their strategists. Hey, it's free. Stop the threatening letters. Stop looking over your shoulder and put your IRS troubles behind you once and for all. Call 800-905-8000 or visit tnusa.com/raft. Once again, that's tnusa.com/raft. Well, welcome back to Special Report on this Valentine's Day. The Senate Judiciary Committee voted this week to advance through President Trump's nominee for FBI Director Kash Patel for a vote in front of the full Senate floor. That vote to confirm Patel could happen as early as next week. Despite the controversy surrounding his hearings, it appears that all the lawmakers Republicans need are on board to get Patel secured in his new role. I want to welcome in independent journalist Ann Vandersteel to the show. Ann, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, it's great to be with you in studio.
Absolutely. But what are we hoping that we see Kash Patel accomplish? There's a lot going on at the FBI, so much. So just dig right in and tell us what Kash can do to clean it up.
Well, frankly, Kash early on was talking about turning the FBI into a museum, and I've said all along it should become a Holocaust museum. We should have docent tours through all the agencies in Washington, D.C. I would volunteer my time for free to provide those docent tours to educate the public on the crimes against humanity inside the agency, which is nothing more than bureaucracy and tyranny, as what we've witnessed. Now, again, if you look specifically just the FBI, as I've likened to the FBI, we now know that they framed, arguably the world's greatest general, General Michael Flynn, when he was National Security Advisor, by falsifying a 302, which is their own notes that they take when they do an interview, in addition to everything else that, levered up until the point where he sat in Judge Sullivan's courtroom for an undue amount of time. Should never have gone that far to begin with. Kash Patel is most interested, I believe, in correcting that record. I think he's probably the most qualified individual to go in and dive deep on the whole Russia hoax, which was a fabrication coming out of the Hillary Clinton campaign, along with their law firms at Mark Elias, et cetera, Perkins Coie, going on down the road, and all of the agencies that were involved to laud out there that President Trump was somehow colluding with the Russians to steal the election. Again, this is a case of where Kash Patel is going to come in and prove that the case of projection is coming from everything that Democrats have said is what they've done, and they've been trying to stick it on the good people in the previous administration. So President Trump, Kash Patel, I call it clean up on aisle 46. And they're going to be doing that with a big shovel and a mop and a squeegee to get it all out.
Well, and he's batting 1,000 on these confirmations. What does your intuition say about Kash Patel getting confirmed? Absolutely.
Look, we have the Senate votes right now. And Robert Kennedy Jr., who, by the way, probably represented the biggest existential threat to the source of money laundering from the public sector in terms of, corporate sector, big pharma. They did not want to see, Robert Kennedy Jr., Secretary of Health and Human Services, because he's going to be taking a deep dive into the Center of Disease and Corruption, the CDC, in the FDA, into the NIH. He's going to be looking directly into these so-called vaccines, which we now know weren't vaccines when it came to the mRNA. That was an injection of what I call a bioweapon to change your DNA, your God-given DNA.
Yeah, and RFK I think it was 52-48 was his confirmation. Did you ever fear that he might not make it over the hump simply because of those views on vaccines?
Oh, it certainly was a concern, but at the end of the day, it is more than just the vaccines. It is the food toxicity. It's the air that we breathe. He's even talked about chemtrails. God forbid we talk about something that was so conspiratorial that the government has been publicizing weather modification for years. So he is bringing to light everything that needs to be addressed in terms of the health and welfare of Americans. And again, this goes back to our founding fathers, right? The right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. How can you be happy if you're being poisoned with the very food that you eat, the water that you drink, and the air that you breathe?
And seed oils beware, I suppose.
Seed oils beware.
Well, Tulsi Gabbard was also sworn in as the Director of National Intelligence, also by a vote of 52-48, after a very intense hearing over questions regarding her support of Edward Snowden, her defense of former Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, and sympathy for Russian President Vladimir Putin. So, Ann, do you think that Tulsi is the right person for the job? This was also a Democrat that left the party, or the party left her, however you want to think of it. Was she the right person, do you think, for Trump to nominate and ultimately take this position?
Absolutely. So first of all, when it comes to being a Putin apologist, I don't believe anybody is a Putin apologist, let alone Tulsi Gabbard. What we're looking at is the adults have arrived back on the world stage. We were absent one of the adults, President Trump, for 4 years, and it really left Vladimir Putin to sort of be the man with the sledgehammer to try and kind of keep things. And if you look at what happened with the Russia-Ukraine operation, the war, the so-called war, I think Putin exercised a lot of restraint, frankly, with respect to everything that NATO, the United States government was involved in under this Biden regime. And Tulsi Gabbard is going to be taking a hard look at the military-industrial complex, which also, by the way, was very much responsible for COVID. And that COVID needs to be really unearthed. We need to go down through, as the head of the DNI, she's going to have a lot of latitude to take a very deep dive into the Department of Defense, into the intelligence community's role, into the cover-up of COVID, and really exercising or excising out the truth about who was funding it, where did that money go, was it really a lab leak in Wuhan, how culpable was our own intelligence community? And I still say the intelligence community has been masquerading behind pharmaceutical do-goodedness, not only in the big pharma world, but they're still lurking in the new medical freedom movement. And in fact, if you look at some of the medical freedom companies that have come on the scene, they're still pushing a lot of the big pharma protocols. Yep. And that is worrisome because, again, this goes back to what Robert Kennedy Jr. is looking at, making America healthy again. And God has always provided what we've needed every single day on this planet, and we have forsaken that by putting poison into our own mouths.
I want to get your thoughts also on Elon Musk. Democrats are calling him out for not being an elected official, yet he wants access to the U.S. Treasury payment system database. In fact, the Democrat representative from Maryland, Melanie Stansberry, said it was wrong to let Elon Musk and his hackers gain access to sensitive databases like the U.S. Treasury payment system. What are your thoughts on that, Ann?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because Elon Musk has been the biggest government one of the biggest military contractors with SpaceX, right? He's gotten billions and billions of dollars every year as he's putting rockets into space and satellites into space. That gives him top secret clearance. So him having clearance isn't a newsworthy item. He's had it for quite some time. And the fact that we, the people, let's be clear, the Constitution is very, very, I'd say, straightforward on we, the people, are the government. It is our fiduciary duty, it is our civic duty to be in there and holding these public officials that are supposed to be our servants accountable, Beau. They haven't been doing it. Right. We, the people, have fallen down the job. We have a lot of sin to atone for, but I think we're making it up rapidly, and I think the Department of Government Efficiency is absolutely necessary at this point because that was our job. Elon represents we, the people, saying, where is that money going? So the fact that he has clearance and he's sending what I would consider a very enlightened young group of individuals that are, part of the team to go in and start laying through these algorithms and quickly ascertaining where this money has gone all over the place. I think it's fantastic, and I think Americans welcome it, and I think we're going to see a lot more Americans coming around being more enlightened by the fact that our government has been stealing us and robbing us blind for decades.
And he's being transparent. That's the thing. He's taking every question. He's showing everything to you what's happening.
Yes.
Nothing's being done in behind closed doors or under subterfuge. So
correct.
You're absolutely right. And of course, Ann, we've got to talk about something that you've been reporting on for us constantly, and that's FEMA funding and the families left behind in North Carolina's Hurricane Helene, and now the victims from the California wildfires. The residents of North Carolina who lost everything were given a $750 check, and not everyone qualified for it. The California wildfire victims received $770. That's pretty paltry. What's going on?
Well, it's an abomination. It's an affront to the American people. Joe Biden was very clear, Beau. He was very distinct in his language when he said, the United States government and FEMA don't have any money for the American people. Are we American people or U.S. citizens? Because according to them, when it comes to the taxes, we're U.S. citizens and we have to pay our fair share. So he's referring to us as Americans, not as U.S. citizens, which I thought was quite interesting. And it's something we can build on. But when it comes to FEMA and having no money, they had no problem, sending out billions of dollars to house illegals that were coming into our country and providing 3 hots and a cot, Medicare, medicine, health care, education, whatever they needed. But when it came to the people that were hurting the most that have paid into the system, there was nothing for them. What did the people in North Carolina learn quickly? That it wasn't the state, it wasn't the government that was going to be there to help them. It was their fellow human being that came out of the hills, the good old boys and women that were living in the hills, that are hardy stock, that are conservative mostly, that came into the blue cities of Asheville and said, we're here to help. We're rolling up a sleeve. We're bringing in our tractors, our backhoes, our skid steers, and we're here to help. So it's been an education process, I think, and one that is necessary, again, to the healing in this country.
So would you contend, Ann, that if North Carolina were to shift its attitudes and realize the state's not here to help me, but my conservative neighbors are, does that portend some sort of domino effect, perhaps, for the rest of the country to follow?
I would think so, because at this point in time, what they've done hasn't worked. And again, it's a definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing over and over. It's sort of like the mass exodus of California, bringing your politics with you to Texas. It's not good. It's not going to work. So I think the awakening is happening, and unfortunately, it took a lot of pain. It's like a child with a hot stove. You can tell them don't touch it, but they're going to touch the stove.
And final thoughts on this with FEMA. You know, Trump has called it an absolute disaster. What are your thoughts on what should happen with FEMA? Should it be defunded? Should it be eradicated? What's the right thing to do based on what you've seen in your reporting?
The right thing to do is to defund FEMA at the federal level and to privatize it. There's lots of good organizations. I can think of one, Steve Schlepsevic's SRP, which is a phenomenal organization. They do an amazing job of disaster recovery. They're there always in advance of a storm, through the storm, after the storm. You can take that model and privatize it throughout the entire country in every single state. You don't need to have it federally managed because, again, what's good for the goose isn't good for the gander. And so it's going to require local action to have that national impact. We have to govern ourselves locally. We can't expect Big Uncle Sam to come bail us out every single time. But you know what? When you paid in the system this long and they give the money to somebody else that's not one of us, that's a problem.
It's embarrassing, but we've got to do something about it. Well, Ann, this has been so pleasurable. I think we've got to keep you around for the rest of the show. Would you stay with us?
Absolutely. I'd be honored. It's Valentine's Day.
That's right. It's a great day to do this. So coming up, we'll speak with our very own White House correspondent, Brian Glenn, about executive orders signed just this afternoon. We'll be right back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Special Report. President Trump has had a very busy week, and today is no exception. He signed more executive orders this afternoon in the Oval Office, and here to discuss is Rav's White House correspondent, Brian Glenn. So, Brian, give us the skinny on what was the focus of these executive orders.
All right. First of all, happy Valentine's Day. You guys match, by the way. You guys
Thank
must
you.
have
We called each other.
sent the memo.
Right.
You did. Okay, so we had two of them today. He was surrounded by some Secretary of Energy, and we've had some other, energy-related, interior-related people behind him. But the first thing he signed was taking away federal funding to universities and schools that require, wait for it, a vaccination passport or proof of vaccination. Now, this was huge. You remember going through all of this, and we all remember, pulling kids out of school. Yep. It created such a disruption in the education process. Well, that is no longer. And to Trump's exact words after he signed that, he says, well, that's easy. That's done. That's easy to fix. So that's been fixed. So parents, you've got some medical freedom. If you want to get the vaccination, that's on you, but the school's not going to require it to go to the university or public school. Now, the second thing he did was basically unleash American energy. And this all kind of started with the renaming the Gulf of America, and which is what it's called, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, it's tapping into the LNG, the oil and gas, and lease, restrictions on drilling on leases and out in the ocean. So it really does just kind of open that up. Plus, he announced a new pipeline that will go to the Northeast, specifically in New York, to provide energy relief for them as well. Apparently, they have been working on this. Other administrations have been working on this for a while. They couldn't get it done. President Trump says, guess what? We're going to have construction complete in probably less than a year on that.
So, Brian, does this mean that America is going to become the world's leading energy exporter again under this current Trump administration, like we were the last time when we were drill, baby, drill?
Yeah, we were drill, baby, drill, and you know what happened? He stopped, President Biden stopped all of that. President Trump even mentioned talking to Prime Minister of Japan about their buying American energy, a lot of gas, a lot of liquefied gas that comes through our country. We have so much natural resources here that we used to sell other countries. And then Joe Biden, well, he didn't really want to do that any longer, so he rolled that back. So now not only are we going to drill, baby, drill more, we're going to be selling this to countries that will pay us good money, and that's all in part of bringing up or boosting our GDP, also cutting into some of our $1 trillion deficit, our $32 trillion. We need to not only cut spending, but we need to also grow our economy, and President Trump thinks this is one great way to do that.
Well, Brian, to switch gears, I hear that the Associated Press had an issue and has been removed from Air Force One. They're not going to be a part. They're not going to have access anymore. What happened there? What can you tell us? Because it is Valentine's Day. We're supposed to be, lots of love. Not a lot of love for the AP. What happened, Brian?
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, well, the last briefing, Caitlin Collins from CNN asked Carolyn Levitt about the AP being pushed out of the Oval Office and their access. She simply replied, look, we did an executive order renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Not only did Google recognize that, Apple has recognized this, other organizations have recognized this name change. But for whatever reason, the Associated Press still wants to recognize it as the Gulf of Mexico. So what she simply said was, if this is the news coming out of the White House, if this is the facts coming out of the White House, and you guys continually to ignore that, and we kind of going back on the battle with fake news. This is something that's really plagued the Trump administration for the last 6 years, is battling the media. So if they're not going to recognize actual news and actual facts, then they won't be allowed to cover events in the Oval Office. And now we're learning that they have been removed, or their seat has been removed off Air Force One, opening up an opportunity to put someone else in that seat that actually will recognize the news coming out of this administration.
Well, that is pretty interesting, Brian. And to that point, we saw with the very first press conference coming out of the White House, the press secretary saying, hey, we have seats here for basically podcasters, independent media. Do you think there's a potential for a seat on Air Force One to be reserved for, say, independent media?
Hey, and I think that's a great idea, and I think that's what's going to happen. Now, there's several seats on that Air Force One right now that goes to foreign media outlets. Now, we can all have a conversation whether or not how many seats should be designated on an American, Air Force plane for foreign press. But that does open up the conversation of this new media. And so, hey, we'll see what happens.
We'll see. As Lizzo sings, it's about DAMN time. I don't want to say the word. I don't want to get FCC to get us. See you soon,
Happy
Brian.
Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, Brian.
Happy Valentine's Day, Brian.
And coming up, America's artist Scott Lobato joins us to talk about art in the Trump era. news from economists forecasting a depression, not a recession. Depression by the year 2030. We're in a perfect storm as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point with the largest generation hitting retirement. A smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. Pair that with our growing national debt and rising cost of living, and we have a huge problem. So what are you doing now to protect your family for the future?
Gold is safe haven in hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text America to 989898. Get your free info kit on gold and a copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with forward by Donald Trump Jr. There is no obligation, only information. Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings. You can count on them too. Text America to the number 989898 today.
That's it. I want to paint a flag on a rooftop in every state near a military base.
As a veteran, we all fought for that flag in World War II. And today, we want to see it flying.
They will never, as long as I am alive, they will never take the American flag down. You want to burn one? Then I will find out where you work, and I will find a building across the street and paint a flag 50 by 100, so you have to see it every f***ing day.
Welcome back to Special Report, where I am joined by my co-host for the day, Ann Vandersteel. For over 30 years, America's artist Scott Lobato has respectfully painted thousands of renditions of Old Glory on schools, homes, firehouses, cars, and canvases, as we just saw in his autobiographical film, The Relentless Patriot.
It is undeniable that Scott loves this great nation with every brushstroke he makes. He is not bashful when he speaks about his country and particularly his support for President Trump. And we want to know, and we want to welcome him right now. Thank you for joining us, Scott.
Thank you for having me. Love you guys. Love your station. Love what you stand for. You're talking about the AP getting thrown off the Air Force One later. It's just like, I love sitting back watching this. 30 years I fought this politically. I was warning people about this time, that we would become so complacent and, suck up all this delicious milk and honey in this country, forgetting how soon it could be taken away from us, not from an enemy overseas, but from the enemy within. And folks, let me tell you something. I hope everybody keeps this in mind, that this past November 5th, we almost lost this country forever.
You're right.
Now we got another 1,000 years of America.
Yeah, and Scott, it's fitting that we have you join us on Valentine's Day, which is a day of love, and I think that this Valentine's Day in 2025 is that much sweeter, just like you said, because of a Trump victory. However, with all the roses and hearts that the retailers are selling today, Trump is giving tough love to Canada, Mexico, China, Hamas, the AP, and anyone else who has run us over in the past 4 years. What has been your assessment of Trump's first few weeks in office?
I'm not shocked. Everybody's so happy. Again, I have supported this man from the very beginning, day and night. I mean, I've got stitches from people attacking me. I'm a New York City artist. I provoke emotion with artwork of Donald Trump, way before, back in 2015, 16, all the way through. And I knew who he was. I respect him because we're in the same boat. As an artist, I am not in the art world. The art world doesn't like me because I don't succumb to the isms of their particular agenda. Same thing with Donald Trump. They hated him on both sides because he's not that politician. He's not a politician. He's a man that loves this country, and he's unorthodox, and that's what I love about him, because I am the same way in my field.
Scott, I love the fact that you're unorthodox, because I feel we're both unorthodox over here. In your documentary, The Relentless Patriot, we learned that you got arrested 3 times at the Brooklyn Museum, going up against what was wrong with the arts. I mean, what was wrong with the arts? Because the Brooklyn Museum, a publicly funded institution, was bashing America? Tell us about your passion for getting the anti-American art out of publicly funded places.
Look, people mention hey, Scott, you would be great to be the Commissioner of Arts and Humanities. And as funny as it may seem, I think it would be great because I am fair. I understand the Constitution. And, if you painted something anti-American or anti-Christian like the Brooklyn Museum constantly did with taxpayers' money, privately, I would support you no matter what the public wanted to put you down. Scott, take that canvas and paintbrush away from him. No, that is his right. That is the beauty about this country. Whether we like it or not, that is his freedom to express. That's his right. But when you use my daddy's money, my daddy who picked up your garbage for 30 years in New York City, that's a no-no. That's where we put a stamp on it. And that's where we save money and direct that money to the culture areas that need it. Young children, PTSD. I try to teach so much to these young veterans throughout the years. I worked with them with the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Be creative. That is your pill, not what Big Pharma hands you and says, take this, son, for your PTSD. No, it is that creativity that everybody has inside them, whether it's sculpting, painting, singing, dancing. And I would totally work with that as well. And, you know, that's where the proof is in my pudding. In the movie, I go up against this second largest museum. I destroyed my art career 20-something years ago when I first went up, and I said, I have to do this. This is from here. That's what makes me a true artist, not the execution of my brushstrokes. It is who I really am and what I stand behind and believe, and do not succumb to the arts that sell a banana duct taped to a wall for $6.2 million. Come on. I would have that all overhauled.
Well, Scott, you know, you don't probably know this about me, but I'm an artist as well, but not a visual artist. I'm a musician and an actor. And a lot of my work, or what I've tried to do creatively, has been, like you, to support our nation and done out of patriotism. And as an artist, I've often wondered why artists are drawn to leftism and liberalism, because I don't conflate artistic expression with liberalism, but people often do. So why do you think that happens? And do you think there's a possibility in this new American renaissance that Trump is creating that could change?
100%. My opinion is being experienced as in the New York City art world. I mean, this is where I went to go find myself back in the 90s. And I saw the disdain and the hatred and the club that you must be part of. And I was taught as a young artist that, no, you are the club. You are the individual. That's what makes a great artist, not to succumb to these isms. And everyone, just like Hollywood, all of these actors, I know a lot of these actors and artists who are conservative, but if they want to succeed in the arts, you have to succumb to that agenda. And it's sad, but I have, as I came out of that closet 30 years ago, I said, I don't need the art world. I'm going to do this and take the chance. Oh, I ate garbage. I was humiliated, abused by the art world. But I came around, and here I am, opening up for the greatest president in the world, Donald Trump, on stage at Madison Square Garden. So I've come a long way against the grain of the arts. And I see so many young creative artists who are now saying, thank you, Scott. You opened that door to let me come out of the closet as a conservative, creative person. You're seeing it in Hollywood, in production. You're seeing it, obviously, in independent media, and in the arts and music. And you see it. Look at all these young rappers, these young, black rappers that came out like for Trump. You know, they say, I have a conservative voice. Why am I being oppressed? This is about art. It's about art. The real artist is true to himself. Come on out of the closet. Listen to me. One more thing. I don't want the art world to change and be a conservative a group of creative people. I don't want that. All I ask for is the fairness that the art world preaches. They preach tolerance and acceptance. And here they are, closing out anybody with a conservative ideology creatively. And that's not what the art is supposed to be about. Everybody should be experiencing art. The most decadent artwork you want to do, I hate it, but that is your right to do so without taxpayers' money.
Amen to that. What is your opinion of President Trump's overhauling of the Kennedy Center and putting himself and Rick Grinnell in charge of it? Could we see the end of the trans and the drag type of art in these fabulous institutions? I mean, frankly, again, we're talking about public money.
Look, this whole concept of everything that happened, the reason we are in this position right now is that this country, we are supposed to be yin yang. We're supposed, back in the 70s, we were a little more liberal, in the 80s, a little more conservative, but we always stay in this box, which is the screen. And the left took everything, every part of society out of the box, astronomically to the moon, whether it was the arts, music, entertainment, media, you name it, the gay, the LGBT community. We all have gay friends and gay family members. It's what we don't care. Nobody cares what anybody does. But when you bring it into, well, this is in your face, you have to accept it. This child needs to know that he can have his genitals castrated because he wants to. That I know so many people in that LGBT community who are so against the radicals in their party. But that's what everything is happening right now, conservatively, especially economically. Same thing with Elon Musk. Everybody's upset with this man, Elon Musk. Let me tell you something. I trust a man who has all the money and doesn't need money or want money than some, politician that wants money and needs money, because we all know what money does to men and women.
Scott, we got about a minute left. I want you to give you an opportunity to talk about what you do with veterans. RFK came in. They've been pushing pills on veterans for a long, long time. What creatively do you do that will be an antithesis to the pills that they've been pushing? And now with RFK at the leadership of HHS.
It's very difficult to deal with these veterans, these young folks that come here. They're so, rightfully, their heads are so, this PTSD that they have. Some of them don't even have it, but they just have this mentality that I do not need help. And we see 22 a day. It was 22 a day that committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And there's so many alternatives. That this pill that I can't stand, that the TV. I'm so glad RFK is going to be pulling that down. You got a splinter? Well, take Splintitis. This will cure you. It's like insane. No, everybody has some kind of form of creativity. No matter, I don't care if you're baking cookies or you make a cabinet or you're a carpenter, you clean pools. There's something in everybody, specifically people with mental distress. Use it. I tell people this. Listen, I'm going to leave it with this. This is my advice. And I tell people this that tell me they have trouble. Go to a art supply store, Michael's, Hobby Lobby. Just roll up and down the aisle.
Creative. I hate to cut you off there, Scott, because we got to go. But you've been so creative, and thanks so much for being with us today. And Ann, thank you for being with me and co-hosting today.
Absolutely. It's been a blast. Happy Valentine's Day.
We'll see you Monday.
You asked, and we heard you, America.
Real America's Voice is coming to iHeartMedia.
Yes, Real America's Voice is now breaking through the white noise of the mainstream media.
Just download the iHeart app, and you'll have all of us right at your fingertips.
Scan the QR code and start streaming RAV anywhere you want.
Real America's Voice, available whenever you need us.
It's never been easier to stay connected with the voices you trust.
RAV on iHeart means you can take us with you wherever you go.
This is huge. The truth on iHeart. Ready whenever you are.
From Charlie Kirk to Steve Bannon, Jack Posobiec to Grant Stinchfield, you'll find all your favorite RAV hosts in one place.
You can listen on Spotify, Apple, Pandora, or Amazon. RAV is now available everywhere you get your podcasts. All you need to do is scan the QR code right now.
Download the iHeart app today and get ready for Real America's Voice.
Scan the QR code and join the RAV movement.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values. We must live them. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass